The first night Clara stepped into the marble-floored ballroom of the Harrington estate, she felt smaller than she ever had in her life, not because of the chandeliers or the polished shoes of the guests circling the room with practiced smiles, but because she could sense something heavy and unspoken hanging in the air, something everyone was carefully stepping around. And as she adjusted the white apron tied around her waist and reminded herself this was just another job, another shift she desperately needed, her eyes drifted toward the far end of the room where a little girl in a pale pink dress stood alone, hands clenched, rocking slightly on her heels as laughter and music flowed around her like she was invisible, and Clara noticed it instantly because she herself had grown up being the invisible one, the girl people didn't quite know how to include, the one they smiled at politely before turning away. And while servers rushed past and executives leaned toward the tall, composed men at the center of the room, the CEO himself, Mr. Alexander Harrington, no one noticed that his daughter Lily hadn't been spoken to all evening, not when the orchestra began to play, not when couples took the floor, not even when a few guests glanced at her and then quickly looked away as if unsure what to do with a child who didn't respond the way they expected. And Clara learned soon enough from hushed whispers in the kitchen that Lily was autistic, sensitive, they said, unpredictable, and that she was better left alone so she wouldn't get overwhelmed. But as Clara watched the child's eyes light up at the movement of the dancers and her fingers twitch to the rhythm of the music, she knew that wasn't the whole truth, because being left alone didn't look like peace, it looked like quiet loneliness. And while every instinct told Clara to stay in her place, to keep her head down and not draw attention, especially not in front of the CEO, something stronger pulled her forward, something rooted deep in her own past, in the memory of being the kid no one chose during games, the girl no one invited to dance, and without thinking about consequences or job security, she wiped her hands on her apron, took a breath, and walked across the ballroom floor, the sound of her shoes echoing softly as a few guests glanced at her with mild confusion. And when she reached Lily, she didn't crouch suddenly or speak loudly or force eye contact like others sometimes did. She simply knelt slowly to the child's level and held out her hand, palm open, her voice gentle and steady as she said, "Would you like to dance with me?" And for a moment nothing happened. The music swelled, conversations continued, and somewhere behind them Alexander Harrington noticed the movement and turned, his brow tightening as he saw a maid kneeling in front of his daughter, and the room seemed to hold its breath. But then Lily looked at Clara's hand, then at her face, studying her like a puzzle, and instead of pulling away as she often did, she reached out with careful fingers and placed her hand in Clara's, and the contact was electric, not loud or dramatic, but deeply human, and Clara stood slowly, guiding Lily just enough to sway side to side, not forcing steps, not insisting on rhythm, just letting the music exist between them. And Lily's movements were hesitant at first, then freer, her shoulders relaxing, her eyes brightening, a small smile forming as the sound and motion finally had somewhere safe to go. And as they danced, the room began to change, whispers fading, conversations stopping, one by one guests turning to watch not out of discomfort but curiosity, then something like awe, because there was nothing staged or performative about what they were seeing, just a maid and a child moving together in a way that made space for difference instead of fearing it. And Alexander stepped forward without realizing he was moving, memories flooding him of doctors, offices and careful explanations, of people telling him what his daughter would never do, of parties where Lily clung to walls while he pretended not to notice the stares, and now here she was, in the center of the room, dancing, not because she had been pushed or corrected, but because someone had invited her exactly as she was. And when the song ended, the silence that followed was thick and trembling until Lily clapped her hands once, then again, laughing, and the room erupted, not in polite applause but in something warmer, something real, and Clara gently lowered herself back to one knee, thanking Lily for the dance as if it were a gift, which it was. And Alexander approached them, his voice unsteady as he said Clara's name. He had asked someone already, thanking her not as a CEO to an employee but as a father to another human being, and that night didn't magically fix everything. Lily still had days when the world was too loud and moments when she retreated inward, but something had shifted, not just for her, but for everyone who had watched and learned. And Clara didn't stay, just a maid for long, not because she was rewarded with promotions or money, though those came later, but because she had reminded a room full of powerful people of something they had forgotten, that inclusion isn't about knowing the right words or having special training, it's about courage, kindness, and the willingness to reach out first. And if this story moved you, if you believe small acts can change lives in big rooms, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because stories like these deserve to be told, shared, and remembered. And your support helps us bring more moments of humanity, hope, and quiet courage to the world.